Needless to say, good morning and welcome to the Select Committee review of the 2023-24 budget. Unfortunately, Councillor Penworthy is unwell and will not be able to chair the meeting today. We will appoint a vice chair shortly. I'm sure you'll join with me in wishing him well and a quick recovery. Can I please ask, to use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it is switched off when you're not using it. Your mobile devices are turned to silent, please. The meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeat viewing by entering the Warspite room, and during the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of these recordings for webcast purposes. Have any members submitted any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies, as you mentioned earlier, from Councillor Penworthy, and Councillor Hayden is substituting today. Councillor Salmon has also offered apologies, and Councillor Watkin is substituting. And just for your reference, Chair, Councillor Shea is unwell today, so we're not expecting him to attend. We believe the leader will stand in for him. Thank you, Chair. As we have no Vice Chair currently, as you're in the Chair, we do need to appoint Chair. Is there any nominations?
I nominate Councillor Mary Aspinall, please.
Is there anybody who will second that, please? Councillor Lugger seconds Mary as being Vice Chair, so Mary is nominated Vice Chair for this meeting. Can I have a quick show of hands, please, to make carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay. Do any members have any declarations of interest in respect to the agenda?
Devon audit.
I need to declare Devon audit as well, Mr. J. I have no items of urgent business so far. Therefore, we move to the budget. Member will have received 2 packs in support of the sessions and a briefing on how the chair will run the meeting. So just a quick reminder to everybody, the leader will be given 10 minutes to open the sessions. Each cabinet member will be given 5 minutes to introduce the sessions. We will not cut people off at 5 minutes, but may ask them to come to a conclusion if we're going to start going significantly over time. Every committee member may have 1 question and 1 supplementary before going to the back of this. This is to ensure that all members have the opportunity to put forward a question or questions. All questions should be directed to the cabinet member. Cabinet members can call on the support of officers as they deem necessary. I will keep time and we will finish when questions are exhausted or when we come to a scheduled finish. Mary will be looking after the speakers list. I'd therefore like to welcome. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. Members will note the timetable schedules the leader at 9:45. I imagine they're going to just start coming in a moment. If members are happy to give me 2 minutes, I'll go and check where they are.
Yeah, Councillor Lowry.
Chair, just in support of the draft aims and objectives, there's an awful lot of information here, which is great news. However, kind of pages 9 to 11, where it's the provisional government settlement, there's very little context to it, so it's very difficult to understand whether a grant that we've received this year is more than last year, or is less than last year, or in fact it's a new grant. So I'm not asking for the answer now, but at some stage throughout this day, can we get some information in relation to the provisional local government finance settlement and an understanding if actually this is good news or bad news, and what the implications may be, please?
Okay, thank you, Ross. I don't know whether you're happy to adjourn for just a 5 minute break before we start at 1:45 with the leaders' questions. Okay, we can move forward now, and I therefore invite the leader to open the session.
Thanks, Councillor Finn, and good morning, everybody. And just like to start by thanking you for all attending to listen to the proposed budget scrutiny session. At this point, I did just want to start by reminding people from our point of view as a council that we have a legal duty to balance the budget, and I think we've got a moral duty to grip public finances every year. So I also want to say that throughout the entire budget planning process, we have been really keen to provide all members and all group leaders with the full detail of solving this very large deficit problem, £37.5 million you'll be looking at over the next 2.5 days. One of the ways that we have approached it, we've treated it as a crisis, and therefore we have gone through a staged process of continuous review, and almost to a point of sort of council leadership team working with the chief executive officer and 151 officer to sort of manage through the crisis, if you like, treating it like any other form of crisis. It's absolutely apparent that we are not alone. If you look at other leaders and other administrations across the peninsula, across the UK, we're all dealing with 10% plus inflation costs, rapidly rising staff costs around approaching sort of 5% and possibly more next year. And of course, the pressures within adult and children's social care, which I have to say are relentlessly increasing. I'd say the other trends that have impacted us massively have been around the sort of persistent volumes of domestic waste because of people's home working. Patterns of work and patterns of lifestyle have changed, so that's driven up pressures too. And this has seen also a massive reduction in parking fee income. So we've been dealing with, within this year, £15 million shortfall. In fact, it's been more than that. And then for the budget 23-24, there's a £37.6 million gap that we were looking at a few weeks ago. Just give you some examples. The cost of running the Life Centre has risen by £575,000 per year. The cost of street lighting has risen by £900,000 per year. Cost of corporate estates and car parking provision has risen by almost £1.5 million, and they are probably conservative estimates. This budget is not about savings, it's a recovery programme about addressing these pressures, and we're focusing on modernising and investing and generating income for the future council. We've done a 360 degrees review of efficiency and effectiveness, and part of this budget proposal will be around actually continuing those reviews and digging deeper in some areas. But it's not all doom and gloom. We have focused relentlessly upon our 4 priorities. These are higher value job creation, more decent green homes in Plymouth, decent education and access to good health and care services. So throughout the next 2.5 days, you'll be hearing from cabinet members that have led on those programmes, and we'll be able to discuss in far more eloquent detail than I about them in the more sort of granular detail. But the headline achievements or programmes that we are pushing to modernise our ambitious city are the delivery of the South West Devon and Plymouth Freeport, where we expect 1,000 jobs in the next 2 years. We've commissioned a port strategy to bring the coastline management integrated and together. We're submitting a bid with Plymouth University and ex-university to the regulatory fund for £1 million to look at maritime and coastguard agency regulatory pilots around marine autonomy, and we think we can become the marine autonomy capital of the world if we invest and get this judge it right. In terms of home building, continuing to deliver the ambition to create more green homes with outline planning consent for a council-owned site in King's Tamerton for 70 affordable net green carbon homes. We've completed the first phase of the Stirling project in Honicknow, construction of 25 self-contained affordable homes to rent. We've agreed housing partnership agreements with Plymouth Community Homes and one with Live West, and working with both partners to identify opportunities for further new affordable home building in the city. We are delivering city centre housing programme alongside DLUC, the Department for Levelling Up, Homes and Communities, and Homes England to kickstart the next phase of regeneration and home building within the city centre. Possibly 144 new homes, and we are pursuing the acquisition of stored sites. Delivering new City Council Direct Homes programme over at Broadland Green in Plymstock, with the completion of 10 higher quality efficiency homes by December 23. We have helped people to leave hospital in a timely and compassionate way by implementing new out of our hospital services, including a 40-bed care home hotel. And, you know, we've seen great events over the past year that we've invested time and money in. Sale GP, the Christmas lights, and not least the British Arts Show recently. So I'd just briefly like to thank residents for taking part in the consultation that we launched between November and December. Interestingly, when you look through those, at least 50% across most savings areas are fully in agreement or suggesting sort of further efficiency savings and further innovations. I would say it is a team effort. We did approach councillors back, I think, first off in August to say, look, here's the scale of the financial problem. Can you contribute your ideas? And then we've heard from the community. I'm really excited about what we will get back from this panel over the next 3 days. We've put to you a draft budget trying to solve a mathematical problem of a £37.6 million deficit. It's over to you to look into that, dig deep, and please give us your suggestions back. And more than anything, having looked at this for 6 or 7 months, I'm really looking forward to what you come back with. The mindset I've had, unfortunately, is kind of a brutal mathematical one, which is if it's not this that we've got to change or remove or pause, then what else is it? Because as I said at the front end of the presentation, we have a legal obligation to balance the budget, and we've got a moral one to grip public finance, and we do not want government commissioners in here that are unelected taking these decisions upon our behalf, because we haven't got a balanced budget. So thank you all, and look forward to your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Bengley, for that full and thorough summary. I'd like to open up questions to the floor now. If there's anybody who'd like to ask questions, please. Councillor Lugger.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the leader. So this committee can gain an assurance, given the fact that we had a tremendous projected budget deficit for the ensuing financial term of 37.6 million, and we have now managed to bridge the gap, there is still a small budget deficit. Does the leader believe that this will be complete, the books will be balanced by the time this is deliberated at full council next? And if so, are you happy with the way this has gone?
Probably starting with the best question for the next 3 days, and I'm entirely confident. I'm really proud of the work the administration and the officers have done. I personally have spent a lot of time looking at where it's gone wrong in other local councils where commissioners have gone in, and we are fully satisfied that we are not anywhere near that trajectory. What I would say is we do need to put up the council tax to the maximum possible tariff without obviously going higher and going to a referendum. That brings us very, very close to addressing the gap. So if we move forward with the proposed council tax increase within these papers, it takes us just very shy of the balanced budget. And then, of course, assuming that the recommendations that we're putting in the draft budget are accepted, we get even closer. And then that becomes sort of management flexibility. We can work around the very, very sort of minimal margin of error. David, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Leader. So I am very confident, I think I've said in every meeting, that the fact that we've moved in the direction that we have, and we're sat here today with a budget gap of 617,000, albeit with a few weeks to get to full council, I am very confident that we can close that gap. The papers that went to the last cabinet sort of say that that gap has been delegated to myself, working with the relevant cabinet member, the deputy leader, and we've already started discussions on about what we cannot do to close that gap. So I'm very confident we will be presenting a full and balanced budget to full council.
Is there a supplementary question, Councillor? No, thank you. Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bingley, under the leader of the council section, one of the areas was the design for the future purpose, function, shape and size of the organisation. You've mentioned numerous times the unprecedented financial challenges that PCC face, along with lots of private sector companies. They're looking at their workforce and downsizing. Are there any plans with regards to downsizing this council's workforce through redundancies, voluntary redundancy or any other means?
Thanks for the question. We have this year been able to manage the process. We've done a full review and not, assuming this budget is passed, not go down the route of full-scale redundancies or needing to sort of notify trade unions and the rest of it. There is proposed some changes to management structure and sort of flattening that out in certain ways. I'll ask Tracy to sort of explore that further with you.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the question. Yes, virtually every area within the council will be looking at its structures. And that starts, and you will see in the budget pack, with the £200,000 saving in senior management structure. That will be consulted on in the coming weeks, and that is a report that would go to full council on the 27th of March. So that starts at the top, but within each area of the council, there will be savings to be made. What I will say to you is that over the last few years, we have reduced down the number of posts, and with the in-year situation the way it is, we have held vacancies as best we can. So what we are trying to do is to make sure that we are minimising the number of redundancies that we would make across the organisation, because we are holding so many vacancies. And those vacancies have been necessary to hold, because that is one of the ways in which we are trying to tackle the 15 million in-year budget gap, and we are now down to 3 million as a result of that. That doesn't come without pain, and I think that's really important to say. You know, every member of this council is gainfully employed, and restructures will be around how we do things differently, how we create efficiencies, and how we look at the way in which we are delivering our services going forwards. But you may want to pick those specific issues up with the directors as you get into various sessions with them.
Thank you, Tracy.
Chair, I have supplementary, please. On the subject of personnel, are there any specific departments where you feel there's severe pressure with the lack of headcount or expertise? And if so, which areas would those be that we would need to actively go out to try to bolster resources in those specific areas?
So there are, this is an employees market at the moment, so people are leaving the organisation on a Friday and going into a much higher paid job on a Monday. That is the nature, and in the past it was very, very specific areas of the council that were affected like that. What I would say to you is pretty much across the board now in terms of shortages that we have, that's not what we're trying to do, is to make sure that we are the best employer employer we can possibly be to attract and retain the talent that we know we need. You'll have sessions later on, I'm not sure if it's today or tomorrow, with the Director of Children's Services. That is a key area for us. Although they're not directly employed, the domiciliary care support across the city, and we've made some really good progress, and Anna Coles, I know, will be happy to brief you on how we're trying to increase domiciliary care, doing a great project with DWP. Being able to get really fantastic accountants is tricky, and of course in the areas of building, quantity surveying and so on, all of those areas are pretty difficult. So making sure that we are the best employer we can possibly be, making sure that we are retaining our talent, making sure we're attracting our talent, and I know Kim's on in the session as well if you want to dig any more deeply into those areas.
Councillor Hayden first, please.
Excuse me, and thank you, Chair. I would like to really talk about the Equalities Impact Assessment, Leader. I've got great concerns regarding it, as I believe it's not showing much detail about the most vulnerable people in our city. You know, for example, when we look at the increase of council tax, you know, the disabled base, the increase, so on and so on. The most vulnerable could end up having to pay £200 a year more. Especially when we look at page 49, after housing costs, the population of working age with people with disability is higher proportion than working age and non-disabled people. And I haven't even discussed the fact that if somebody who is disabled would even like to spend a penny in one of our public toilets with that increase. So for my benefit, I would like a recommendation, Ross, for a more detailed equality impact assessment, because I don't believe it's actually enough detail has gone into this.
Yeah, Councillor Hayden, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if the chair wanted, if the leader wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that, would be wonderful. Thank you.
Just to say, I mean, it's your committee. If you feel that way, then I would ask officers to address that, and if you had specific reasons, maybe you want to sort of take that offline, and they can address the specific reasons. I think with equality impact assessment, look, no one is denying that it doesn't have that this budget doesn't have a fundamental impact upon the people of Plymouth, and indeed certain demographics and categories of people under the 2010 Act. We wish that we weren't producing a budget to address a 37.5 million deficit. We wish there was a lot more cash flow in the council. So that, in terms of sort of the equality impact, as we have looked at it, we are confident that we are compliant with the EIA process as things are. So EIA is not so much about the savings and pauses and services that you're doing, it's about whether you've addressed the function fairly. And we feel at this point that we have addressed it fairly. But certainly if there was more depth that you required, I think we're more than happy to provide that. I don't know if any officers want to, Tracy, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely, and just in terms of a recommendation, that would be great, and particularly any particular areas where you feel the equality impact assessment is lacking, then that would be great. What we'd also ask though is any proposals or suggestions for mitigation of those that sit alongside it would be really gratefully received. You will see from the total sum of the savings on the table. We've never had savings of this size on the table. Normally, if I could say there'd been a normal year in my 10 years here, normally we start with about £17 million of savings and we work down. We have never had to save, this amount of money. There are a whole variety of proposals in front of you. And this equality impact assessment, if we have missed elements of it, then please, that is really, really important to us. What I would also say, though, in terms of specific decision making on specific proposals, each specific proposal will need to go through its own governance arrangements. So many of those are executive decisions, and when those executive decisions come forward, there will be a more detailed and very specific EIA that accompanies a decision that is made. So we're asking you to do two things, Manny. We're asking you to look globally at this budget. We're asking you to scrutinise the budget, but in terms of the absolute individual proposals where an executive decision is required, that will have to, in line with our governance, go through its own processes as well. So pointing us to those areas where you've got concerns is really helpful.
Through you, Chair, just to reiterate the point that Tracy's just made, we're going to see a number of decisions which follow the budget will have EIAs attached. There is some decisions in this budget, so the EIA is populated to cover those decisions. But when we come to our recommendation setting on Thursday, we can flesh that recommendation out slightly. Thank you.
And Chair, I can explain what I meant when we come to the recommendation. I can put it more into words if that's better.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hayden. Do you have a supplementary question to that? No.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Councillor Poyser.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly there's lots of detail we need to get into over the next few days, which we're looking forward to do. Just a headline question really around council assets, and just to focus the mind a bit about whether there's any proposal in here to dispose of council assets, what they might be, and when they might be disposed of. Would it be in the next financial year?
Thanks, Councillor Poyser. The very short answer is yes. We carried out a fundamental review of all council assets, and we felt that there were significant fixed assets that we could release, and that would make the corporate estate sort of more efficient, but also potentially bring in some much needed money. So I don't know if you're aware, around Windsor House, so we've unlocked that basically, and the projected saving is £500,000. Midland House, the saving will be to the tune of £230,000, and that then you've got to think about if they sell. It's a very difficult market for commercial property. So that's just sort of two examples. It's not easy to immediately disengage from property, and so therefore I think staff have all now removed from Windsor House, but I'm going to let the officers confirm. But there are always difficulties particularly when you're sharing premises at Windsor House with other agencies, and just getting things like the cabling and the rest of it sort of decommissioned safely. So I'll let the others speak more roundly about that, but yes, to answer your question.
Just to confirm, there are still a few people in the basement at Windsor House. They're due to move out shortly, and we've got our data centre there. They're absolutely fine in the basement. I can see that. Look, Councillor Riley, I haven't locked them away. So they will be moving out shortly, and there's some new accommodation in Crown Hill Court, which was a building we bought a few years ago, and so that's been converted. More staff are moving into Ballard House, which is the start of the decant of Midland House. So those processes are underway. I think you've got some sessions coming up with both Andy Ralphs and also Councillor Mark Shayer, who have responsibility for corporate property. So once again, Councillor Poyser, you might want to get into some detail there, but that programme of how do we rationalise our assets, how do we make sure we've got the right number of operational assets to do the job we need to do. I call it the fewest roofs to feed, because they all take maintenance, they all take time, but just getting that balance between being able to deliver our services in the best, most cost-effective way, but also making sure that we are able to keep our buildings in good repair, which is something we have not done in the past by any stretch of the imagination. So being able to have that programme of investment in the assets that we are keeping, and actually going back to that point around recruitment and retention, people working in an environment that is a better environment for them is just boosts morale. So that's a really important part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'd just like to take a positive there, Miss Lee, in that for the first time we have a planned maintenance programme for the buildings rather than falling into a state of degradation and the huge costs that follow thereafter. Thank you for that. Councillor Lowry, please.
Good morning. I'm kind of looking for some reassurances, really, because I appreciate you've had a very difficult challenge with respect to this budget. But in reading the detail, there is a considerable lot of one-offs that are outstanding. So that means, great, you pay the bill this year, but there's no money to pay the bill next year. And doing some adding up, there's somewhere in the region of potentially £4 or £5 million, if not more. I don't understand how much money is being used from reserves. There's some reference to reserves. I don't understand what the working balance will projected to be at the end of this. And equally, you know, Tracy's just referred, the chief executive has just referred to morale. I am concerned, to say the least, that we are spending £8.8 million on agency staff. That's to the end of this year. What is your projection for next year? So, how much are we using on reserves? What's your plans for one-off? What's your projected expenditure for agency staff next year, and what's your plan to deal with that, given your context around morale? And the last item was working balances, please.
It's fine. I mean, the first thing to say is, you've got a revenue budget of well over £200 million. We're delivering 300 services. There will be one-offs every year. That's a reality when you're running a big organisation. You do have to be pragmatic, particularly in this financial circumstance. So, I'm looking forward, particularly with your background expertise. It's great you're on the committee, and I'm looking forward to, as I said, what the committee come up with over the next 2.5 days, because there's a lot of experience on this committee. So, in terms of reserves, we served on the Audit and Governance Committee together last year, and I think I asked repeatedly around, I was concerned around our reserves position in Plymouth. I think it's far too thin. It's been flagged up by auditors. In the latest audit report, there's a recommendation that we contribute £350,000 at least a year to get the reserve, to get more airspace within the reserves. We need to do that, and so I am concerned about reserves, and I'm on the record for that. In terms of agency staff, it is unfortunately an employee market and an agency market at the moment. That is something that's fundamentally got accelerated since COVID, and actually I think we're more vulnerable to it as a peninsular economy. The people realistically they can sort of dart about from supplier to supplier and from employer to employer. It's one of the strengths of Plymouth that we're trying to attract sort of hybrid working and flexible working. One of the big negatives and vulnerabilities, I think, for Plymouth City Council is the city's projected in that way for the future. So that is kind of my opening sort of policy direction on it. But if you don't mind, I'll hand over for more detail to Tracy. Sorry, Dave.
That's okay. Thank you, Leader. Thank you for the question. I can't remember the order you threw them at me, but I'll take them as I think. So in terms of the working balance, currently we're sat at around the 8.4 million, which is about 4% of our net annual budget. It's not written in stone, but there is sort of authority-led view that should be around 5%. So we're below that, and we do have plans to improve that position. Talking to colleagues around the country, it is not written in stone, and I would like to give you examples of people who would say, yes, I've got that number. So that's where we are. In terms of getting that back up, we have plans to do that. I think it is, in my head, it's almost like my personal savings account, and if I'm having a bad year and I've got all the bills coming in, it's my first priority to top up my savings account or to make sure that I'm covering my running costs. So in that terms, I'm not saying that it's not important, but it's there and we will look at it. But it's 8.4 million, it's very strong, and I do take the view and accept the comments from Grant Thornton about we should be improving that. So that's that one. In terms of use of one-off reserves and balances, Councillor Lowry, so in the current year we've been facing in excess of £15 million of additional costs. I hope it's clear in the monitoring report, as we've been going through, that I have, with colleagues, taken a dip into our reserves to the tune of about 1.6 million, less than 2 million at the moment. I have said that we will work very hard to make sure that we get to a balanced position and we don't have to go to that back safe, which is the working balance. So confident that we'll be holding that at the 8.4. In terms then of one-offs, I think we all know that us as a council, every council, always rely on some kind of one-offs. We cannot, a budget is a budget, as we know, and the nature of that is things will change, and we're always looking for additional grants or whatever to help balance those one-offs. In terms of a plan for the current year, 22-23, we started and we knew what was in there. It was very clear. We had £11 million worth of one-off savings to help balance the current year. And part of the reason that we had to look at 37.6 million for next year is you've got to start with that £11 million gap, haven't you? So I haven't done the analysis, but there is not £11 million worth of one-off savings built into 23-24 as we stand. And the plan has always been to bring that down as quickly as we can. I will never sit here and say that we do not have any one-offs built into the budget. There will always be something, there has to be some scope, but we're not replicating what we did in the current year with 11 million. And that's why we've been very strong, and very strong advice to Cabinet, to CMT. We need to come up with sustainable savings that will come in and they will reduce the cost base and they will be there long term. I think that covers your questions, Councillor Larry.
Just come in on that. So to that point, David's made it really well that coming into this year, I think when we looked at what the gap would be for 23-24, and I think we looked at how can it possibly be £37 million when you consider what our base revenue budget is for the year. But actually, when we did the analysis, as David says, that 37 has 11 million of one-offs in it. So what I would say to you is that we have worked very, very hard to try and make sure that we are reducing the level of one-offs. So yes, Councillor Lowry, I've counted, it's about 4 million of one-offs that we are relying on. Some of that is grant, so the grant will always come in and out of our budget. So the way in which we balance our budget, the way in which we do that, grants will come in. So you could say, if you get that grant every year, is it a one-off or is it recurring grant? Well, it's only recurring when we know it is recurring, as opposed to government saying to us, here's a similar amount of money you had to last year. So there will always be a bit of that in the budget, but I think we have worked really hard to try and reduce that down. I think the identification of being really, really clear which of those lines are one-offs is something that David and I have really pushed for. So we're very, very clear what we'll do, what we'll need to do going into 24-25. I have to think in my brain where we're going, which is, as you say, it's always, you start with that 4 million on the table as one-offs, and anything else that's swapped in as one-offs contribute to that. Just in relation to the agency, I know, Councillor Lowry, we've had many conversations about agency over the years, and the agency figures are higher than they have been for many years. A few years ago, we got those agency figures down to about 5 million and 5 to 6 million, where so it is not a comfortable figure to have over 8 million of agency. What I would say to you, though, is that the reasons for agency, we will always have some agency, seasonal work, one-offs, opportunities to extend the workforce on a temporary basis will always be one-offs. We wouldn't recruit on a permanent basis to do that. And grants, we have been very successful in getting grants, particularly in the Place Directorate. And again, that's an area where we will often go to agencies to make sure that we're covering those particular posts. But the largest area and the largest increase has been where the market has changed and we cannot recruit directly. And you'll say, well, why can't you recruit directly? Because pay levels are so much higher in the temporary market. So I won't say but we are getting, our social workers are getting calls directly from agencies to say, come and work for us for £10,000 more. Come and work for us for more money. That is tricky. It's tricky when you've got pay scales, when you're trying to be fair to everyone. The range of jobs we provide in local government, we have got, as you know, national pay scales that we use, but we're competing in many areas with the private sector. Those private sector used to be our commercial lawyers and those who were involved in construction. Now that private sector are social worker companies who are, who are coming into the market to say, come and work for us as social workers. So, teams go into councils, and we've had some of those teams because of the severe shortage. So the answer here is always, in fact, I've just been at CMT this morning, to make sure that we are once again going through line by line, who have we got, what are they doing, do we need them, how long do we need to keep them, when can we lose that member of staff, how do we make sure as part of the restructures that we're doing, we are not having false economies around that. That's tricky when, as I say, you've got those national pay scales, and something we're going to have a look at is how do we do that. We're doing a review of our market factor supplements to see whether that can help with the process for direct recruitment. And then that big piece about recruitment and retention. So one of the questions I will always ask our staff is, what's it feel like to work for Plymouth City Council? Why do you work for Plymouth City Council? What's good about working for Plymouth City Council, and what would you change? And building that in, and through our staff surveys, building that into how do we make sure that people feel part of the family, part of the team, that they can see the end results and the things that they're doing as part of the work we've done. So it's not a simple, I'm not going to give you a simple answer, and this is a simple percentage, and we're going to get it down to this number because the market is so difficult at the moment in terms of employment that that wouldn't be the right thing to do. What we do and what we continue to do is ask our managers to manage to the bottom of their bottom line in terms of their pay bills. So that is looking not just at agency, it's looking at overtime, it's looking at acting up responsibilities, and combining all of that together to come so that we're saying to managers, you know, manage your budgets, manage them well. We will look at individual lines, but we want to you to be accountable for the way in which those services are delivered and the staffing that you need to deliver them.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Thank you. I'm comforted by the response in respect of one-offs. Thank you very much for that. I think I also heard that there's 1.6 million being spent from reserves. David, you refer to the working balances and there being a plan, but you'll note this report makes no reference to a plan and says there will be no additional money this year going into working balances. So at some stage, we need to see the plan, please. I mean, it might be in your head, which is great, nice place for it to be, but at some stage, as a committee, we also need to understand what your aims and ambition. And with respect to the agency, I get what Chief Executive has said, and I think, you know, just noting some of her words, we're having a look at it. Can you give us the figure? It doesn't have to be now. At some stage, what your projected agency spend will be for the next budget, the next financial year, which is the year we're currently looking at. And we do need a plan. I mean, I get all the comments you made, Tracy, in respect of it's difficult and it's challenging, but nevertheless, that's what we're all paid to do, deal with difficult and challenging issues. And if this agency staff is going to continue to go the way it has been, then, you know, it's not going to help the city or the council's finances. So if we can do those things, we much appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just say in respect to what Councillor Lowry's actually alluded to there with regard to agency costs, is when that figure comes out, can it take into consideration obviously the overhead costs of direct employment as well against that? Because obviously the cost of employing X and Y could actually reduce the actual the top end figure. Is that okay? Okay. Councillor Coker, please.
Good morning, Leader. My question is not as detailed, but I think it's really important. You opened your speech this morning about growing Plymouth, higher paid jobs, etc., and how it is important. If you also look at the risk register, the insufficient economic performance to sustain the city's economy and growth plans, that's gone from amber to red. The government has levelled us down, not up. So what I would like is some reassurance, because at the growth and overview, we looked at both the Freeport and the investment zones, and the key that would make to the growth of the city. So we've not been levelled up. That's now gone. What worries me, Leader, is the amount of money, time and effort that we put into those bids for no return. So that I presume those plans are now stalled, on hold, or whatever. And when you link the levelling up to areas of deprivation, we've just had the health indices for the city released. My ward and certain other wards have gone backwards. This levelling up was to engage and revitalise some parts of those areas. Now we've failed in that bid, with the risk register now gone from amber to red. I'd like to know what your plans are, and also how you feel about that, because this should be above party politics, Leader. We failed, and we need to understand why and what we're doing going forward.
Thanks, Councillor Coker, and always a delight to see you and receive questions from you. I'm kind of more of a glass half full person, maybe, and there's some good stuff going on. Plymouth's employment level is 2 to 3% above what it was. We've got 260 new businesses that have come to the city in 2022 and started here, and we've just been listed within the top 10 entrepreneurial cities in the UK. We are the first city to get over the line on Freeport. When we put the bid in, it didn't kind of look that likely, but that's been a cross-party commitment and lots of energy around it. It was disappointing last week, and I'm on the record of saying it's disappointing to not get that levelling up bid through. It was nothing to do with the capability of the team or the cross-party commitment. I think personally it was entirely to do with the fact that no other Freeport got the levelling up fund money last week. And as we do analysis, I don't think anyone from the first round that got the levelling up fund got it in the second round. But just to say, yeah, it's not good enough. We are writing to establish the reasons why that didn't happen formally. I'm seeing the Levelling Up Minister early February, and that was a meeting that was planned for last week, actually. We are bidding for a university investment zone. So that is being announced. It's just coterminous to you asking that question, so forgive me that you've not seen the media around that, but that is agreed with us and the University of Plymouth over the last few hours, and the statement will go out. Freeport will deliver us something to the tune of 3,500 jobs in Plymouth and South Devon over the next sort of decade at least. You mentioned health. I completely agree. About 5 days ago, Tracy and I were sitting in the Department of Health in London with Lord Markham, the Health Minister, and we were saying about the health inequality that I think in your ward or wards around that people got a life expectancy of 7 years less than other wards in Plymouth, and that is not acceptable. Your ward, I think, is within the most deprived, 1% most deprived. We've got 26 areas in Plymouth that are within the 10% most deprived. This is what we're all committed to changing and driving up, and therefore what we did ask was around acceleration and the unlocking of money or favourable rates, capital rates to get the Colin Campbell Centre or the West End Health Hub built and built rapidly. So I think the cross-party work is there, the energy is there, most of the data is going in the right way, but I do completely accept the point that in Plymouth, I think some of us came into politics here, is to the average wages are far less. Entrepreneurial activity is still not at the rate that we would want. But all we can do, I think, as politicians and as people sort of driving economic development, is to create the favourable conditions, for a city to thrive and prosper. And I think very much that we're doing that. Personally, I think, and I know there's other people in the room that are strong on this, is we need an airport. I think it is an aviation hub, and an airport is one of the things that holds back certain sectors' investment. Obviously, very good at marine and marine autonomy, but wider sectors need to see better transport connectivity. We are all strong in representing on that, whoever is in control. But I would go back to the fact, I think here we got £77 million of external funding from 50 sources over the last few years between us, cross-party working and between us. It was disappointing last week, but we will turn that around and get that money into Plymouth. Please be assured.
Thank you, Councillor Bingley. Is there anybody else that would like to talk on this subject first on the round robin, as per the brief? All right. Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Perfectly timed. You've mentioned earlier, Councillor Bingley, about the aspirations and ambition for Plymouth, which clearly is commendable, and we want the city to be recognised globally, and we've done well in recent years with that. You just mentioned about the airport. Can you confirm that the monies that were put aside to make that a real possibility with regards to the acquisition of the site are still in this budget? And if so, is it the same level of funding that was put in when I was leader, or has that been diminished, bearing in mind the pressures that you've alluded to along the way?
It's a different dynamic now because as you know, elements around the airport are subjected to non-disclosure agreements and legal conditions. So the policy remains consistent that we seek to acquire that land for the purposes of delivering a city airport or an aviation hub, and whatever it takes, really. And we're around sort of legal cases, whether they conclude within the next 2 months or whether they conclude in 2 years' time, is quite difficult to kind of budget around. But certainly what I can say, the resources will be there to support our shared commitment for Plymouth City Airport. But I can't really go down the route of discussing sort of legal conditions and I would say costs, if I could put it that way, Chair.
Yes, totally respect that, Councillor Bingley. Councillor Kelly, supplementary.
Well, I'll rephrase the question. It was a very simple question. It was either a yes or no answer. It's either that the level of funding in that budget was as I put in, or it isn't. And it would be nice to know whether you've increased it or decreased it if it is a change. It's not. There's no non-disclosure arrangements with regards to that. There's no sensitivity with that. It's just a very simple yes or no question, and it would be very reassuring for anybody watching and those interested in the airport to know that whilst words are great, practical measures are even more important.
So just to restate, sometimes things are not a Boolean yes or no when you are committing to delivering the city airport, and the commitment remains there and the resources will be found for it. But in terms of budget lines, I will hand over to David.
Thank you, Leader. In terms of the budget, Councillor Kelly, all that's changed is slippage from what you put into the budget in 22-23, moving into 23-24. So if that's a yes, everything is as you put it on the table, then the answer from me is, from a financial point of view, yes. But I also agree with the Leader that discussions need to take place as we go forward. Whether that is enough, whether it's the right contribution, but the answer to your specific question is it is slipped from 22-23 and it is in 23-24.
Thank you. Councillor Lugger.
Thank you, Chair. We have the issue, of course, of balancing the budget, and we also have the issue of reducing expenditure going forward. My question is around the Council's transformation programme and the new business support service that's been introduced. Can we take assurance that this is going to continue driving down expenditure as we go forward? Thank you.
Councillor Lugger, I'll hand to Andy Rouse, Service Director.
Through you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Lugger. So yes, we've already taken 1.6 million from business support. That was delivered this year. Service went live in January. And there are plans, further plans in the budget to reduce that expenditure down in 23-24 by a further £200,000, and that is through some of the digital transformation work that we're doing. Like every service, that has demand pressures as well, because as certain areas within the council demand more support, areas such as children's services, adult social care, additional demand comes into those teams, and we've obviously seen that as well across things like subject access requests and other areas within that support service. But we are looking to reduce that by a further £200,000 in 23-24.
Supplementary, Councillor Lugger.
No, that's admirable. Thank you.
Is there any further questions? Okay, sir. Councillor Lowry, please.
Leader, you made an awful lot of comments in your opening remarks about housing, and that's something that's very dear to my heart, actually. And having had that portfolio in the past, made tremendous efforts to ensure that the land we had and the opportunities around us, we actually built houses for people to live in, and that's incredibly important for sustaining an economy, as you've already addressed. I'm very tempted to ask you how many new starts took place last year and how many of those were affordable, but I won't embarrass you because it's 160 and only 14 of those were affordable housing. Okay, so we, in my view, are failing as a city to provide the homes that people need for the future to grow this economy. So would you therefore be prepared to accept a recommendation that says the council must do better and aims to provide somewhere in the region of at least 1,000 homes a year moving forward?
Councillor Larry, thanks for the question. I think absolutely the creation of affordable housing in Plymouth has not been to the levels that any of us would desire. I mentioned, I think, 5 schemes in my opening talk across 5 sites that totaled around 384 houses. I would like to see a big uplift, and that's why when we issued the strategic plan, our delivery plan back in early July, we very carefully put house building at the sort of the centrepiece. Those 4 strategic priorities, decent green houses was at the centrepiece of that. So I'm pleased to see the initiative with Homes England be pushed forward. I don't know whether Tracy could kind of discuss that more with you today. At this point, I mean, I am comfortable saying, yes, that we should be building at least 1,000 homes per year in Plymouth. And I'm comfortable putting that in writing as a policy. But what I would urge you is to perhaps re-ask that question during Councillor Smith's session and dig deeper around what the kind of short and medium term outputs will be. But I will hand over to Tracy, I think, to provide more detail for you, Councillor Lowry.
Councillor Lowry, you're absolutely right. The number of affordable homes, the number of homes generally built in the last 12 months is nowhere near where we need to be compared with the heyday. And we had a couple of years where we absolutely excelled in terms of we got over 1,000 homes. What I would say is looking at the market, it's not unique to us in Plymouth. That doesn't mean that's an excuse. We've got to do better. But the market has stalled in terms of house building, and particularly over the last year, that has been an issue. One of the things I think that's also fundamentally changed is the way in which house building comes forward, but also the relationships and how Homes England want to progress. Because, as you're all aware, the government uses Homes England, its housing agency, to really help with grant funding, but often loan funding for the delivery of affordable homes. Plymouth Community Homes are part of a strategic partnership with Homes England, and there are other big affordable housing RSLs, registered social landlords, that are also part of strategic partnerships. So making sure that we're working with people who have got some of that funding coming through from Homes England is really important. But we're also making sure that we're deepening our relationship directly with Homes England. And one of the things that we really want to do, and we're working with them, is to make sure that we can accelerate the delivery of city centre housing. And as we know, if you think about the city centre, we have cultural-led regeneration, we've had leisure-led regeneration, we've got transport-led regeneration in our city centre. The piece of the puzzle that's missing for our city centre is housing. And the work that we're doing with Homes England to really, for them to get it and to really understand the scale that is possible in the city centre if they invest with us and for us, is something that we are absolutely actively doing. What we're also talking with them about is, rather than providing one-off scheme funding, which is very welcome but takes a lot of time and effort by the time you get into lots and lots of bids, we want to be in a programme of funding with them, where that programme comes together and we can use that programme to really address the scale of change. Homes England, bearing in mind the number of jobs that are either live in the city or coming to the city, really get that sense of ambition. The Freeport, again, is part of that game changer in terms of what developers are thinking about our city. So we hope in the coming months to be able to report more on that relationship with Homes England and how we want to get more housing. So it is work in progress. There's a lot of work to do. So a recommendation is very welcome. It is something that we are actively aiming to achieve.
Chair, I would just ask that, in addition to the recommendation in itself, it's worthy for us to note that the council tax base increases every time there's a new home. So it does have a direct effect on our revenue budget. So there are ways in which we can assist in achieving the objective through financial methods. So if we can consider a recommendation to increase the number of new homes, and I think we'll need to work collectively as a panel as to the exact wording. But yes, if we could consider that as a recommendation, please.
Yes, Councillor, I will certainly take that on board. Thank you. Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly the budget, there's lots and lots of papers here. You alluded earlier with regards to the working balances, and I know that on the Audit and Governance Committee it was brought up, and I presume we put great store on what our external auditors, Grant Thornton, recommend, and the advice and guidance that they give. On that score, the first part of the question, is there provision within this budget somewhere, as the accounts have not been signed off by Grant Thornton due to the Miel pension transaction, and clearly that could and may have a very severe financial implication, somewhere in the region of 3 million, but you can correct me if that's incorrect. Is that provided in here, or is that likely to possibly rear its head and be another potential cost that isn't factored in? That's the first part of the question.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. I will immediately ask David to address that.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. That's a very good question. I can confirm that the budget proposals do have contingency in there to cover where myself and the position that Plymouth City Council take in terms of conversations with Grant Thornton and also with the pension fund about the way forward. So there is provision in there. There could be an upside, but negotiations haven't completed yet. But as it stands at the moment, there is enough allocation to cover the costs.
And as the question was sort of linking in with regards to the external auditor and Grant Thornton, in the alternate budget last year that was put forward, one of the recommendations to balance it out was that the 350,000 to top up the working balances was delayed, if you like. I've just heard from Councillor Lowry that in this budget it's a similar methodology, so that's now some 700,000. It's already been alluded to by Councillor Bingley that he had grave concerns about the level, and it's one of the topics that constantly crop up. I know you've been asked to provide a sort of repayment plan in this meeting as to how it's going to be funded, but when does it come a serious point that from an auditor point of view they really sort of get a little bit uppity to say, yeah, really have been perhaps turning too much of a blind eye to our recommendations to put these monies back? Because based on what Tracy's just said, and based on the fact that it would be great, whatever we agree as a council, it's a more of a medium-term financial plan that you don't have to keep relying on one-offs. I can foresee that this time next year we'll be sat in exactly the same situation, saying we don't have the monies available to top that up, and there's going to come a point where that fund becomes so low, it's a serious problem.
I couldn't disagree with a word of that, so I will ask David to answer.
Thank you again. So, yes, I take great store and work very closely with our external auditors, so I do take on board all of their comments. It is a two-way conversation, obviously, so I've got to keep an eye on the council's finances. They've got to keep an eye on keeping us safe, if that's the right expression. If you look into the recommendations that are part of the papers, which is fine because that's open and transparency again, it does make reference to their view it could be better. My initial response, and it was a very quick response back, and I'm still going to have conversations with Grant Thornton, is about it's okay to say that is not sufficient. What would be really useful is for you to give a guidance of what it should be, because as I said before, the 5% is not written in stone, it's a nice to have. So we will continue a plan to work towards that, but I do accept that in the current year that was taken away, and there is no specific budget allocation to do that in 23-24. But let's just remember that we've been sat at that 8.4 million for quite a while. Resources are actually coming down, so in terms of a percentage, it is what it is, isn't it? And dialogue will continue. I will be putting together, and I'm sure you'll make a recommendation about this, not to be showing you a one-year budget, but to actually go back to a minimum 3, possibly a 5-year rolling medium-term financial plan. And in there, I will need to set out, as part of that strategy, how we will address that balance.
Through you, Chair, if that recommendation can be noted with regards to the medium term, and I appreciate this is a supplementary, and this is a budget scrutiny, so it might come under audit and governance, but for all the years that I've been on the council with regards to finance, this 5% working balances has been thrashed around. Some say it's too high, some say it's too low, some say it shouldn't be a percentage base, it should be risk-based and monetarised. Do you think that if it's not directly from us today, but it could be taken forward, that it would save an awful lot of time, effort and sort of discussion, that we have a thought out hard line, either base figure or percentage, that it's not, well, it's a nice to be, it should be the bottom line under all circumstances, that's where it should be, because we just go around the periphery all the time. Well, it's not written in stone to be 5, but it'd be nice to be 5. And then if it's slightly below, it's only slightly, it's not a problem. So could we perhaps quantify that? Because I think too much effort and time is spent on that in every meeting.
I don't think that's unreasonable in part, but I also think that we must take on board with this unprecedented financial situation of obviously high interest rates. We don't know what the projections of interest rates are going to be next year. We don't know what property valuations are going to be next year, whether there's going to be a fall with regard to the property market. So I think in the short term, what the officers and the leader has done is made it absolutely clear that this takes us up to the end of this financial year and takes us into the new financial year. And obviously, I think we need to take stock, say, next year, when things become clearer, and then move forward on that basis. I think just to run ahead and put a 5-year plan in place, not knowing you know, what sort of market we're operating in would be very dangerous.
So, sorry, through you, Chair. So I'll just say again, I am talking very, as you would expect, with Grant Thornton to make sure that we are safe and that and I think if you read it's a recommendation that we should be looking at it. They haven't said that it's an issue. They haven't flagged it up as an urgent item for discussion. It's in there as it should be for us to have that discussion. So when I put that medium-term plan together, that obviously has to be part of that, and that will come forward. I'm quite happy for that to be scrutinised.
Thank you very much, David. Is there any further questions? Needless to say, with regard to recommendations, obviously the recommendations run for. We'll do the recommendations at the end. We'll take the recommendations on the board. The recommendations have been noted. Is there any further recommendations that the committee would like to make for consideration?
Chair, there is something. Councillor Hayden brought it up in the beginning with regards to the equality impact statements. When you look at all the paperwork and you look at all the potential alterations, changes, policies that we're looking to discuss and scrutinise, the impact on the environment and the carbon element is just very much, this report has no direct consequence. And I think that as a council that has declared a climate emergency, and as a council that we said everything we do, that would be at the forefront of our minds and interwoven, there doesn't seem to have been sufficient resource or, I suppose, thought put into the potential impacts of carbon and the climate emergency with regards to these proposals. So whether that can be fleshed out, I appreciate it's been said with the equalities impact as and when they come forward, but we're being asked today to make recommendations and sort of agree without the necessarily information about the possible impact it could have on environmental pressures. And if we are serious about trying to be net zero by 2030, that's only some 6 and a bit years away now. I don't feel we've given due diligence with regards to this budget, and ultimately that will drive sort of the impact on the environment and our ambition to achieve that 2030 net zero.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Tracy.
I think the point that Councillor Kelly is making is a very good one. I suppose there's several ways, a bit like the equalities impact assessment discussion earlier, very welcome to make a global recommendation around the carbon impact. You might also just want to specifically look as you get into sessions with the services and you're getting into the details of proposals, any specific areas where you have got concerns. Again, that would be very welcome, and you may get some reassurance from talking with the directors in those sessions, and that might point you to very more specific recommendations about what you think we should take forward.
As we're running ahead of time, we'd like to say to discuss some recommendations in the absence of the committee, but to say thank you, David, Tracy and Councillor Bingley for your contribution to the budget scrutiny meeting in class. Yes, and we need to clear the room for this stage so we can come back and just discuss the recommendations.